Hi, my name is Martin Purnell and welcome to Off-Grid Christianity, a weekly podcast for those who go or don't go to church and where we can meet and hear from those that have made their faith count. The podcast series is to encourage via conversation, and you can contact us as well by email, ogc@accessradio.biz, biz is spelled B-I-Z. Our website address is www.offgridchristianity.co.uk. And if you haven't already, please hit the subscription button. That would really mean a lot to us. Thank you very much indeed. So, today's guest. Who is he? Well, he's an author of several books, a psychotherapist, a mindfulness researcher, as well as a Baptist minister. Our guest is also the honorary chaplain to the Scargill Movement. He also likes newts. His latest book, Mindful Formation, A Pathway to Spiritual Liberation, is out now. So what is the Scargill Movement? Why has he a fascination with newts? Is he related to Ken Livingstone, the ex-mayor of London, who also liked newts? I remember that. As a psychotherapist, what has he learned about God and characters found in the Bible? Anyway, what is mindfulness? And are there any similarities, apart from the obvious, between Christian and secular mindfulness? What's the difference? How does he balance a church and psychotherapist work life? What does our guest see as the biggest stresses of the 21st century? Is church stressful? That's not just for ministers, but for congregations as well. It gives me great pleasure to ask all these questions and listen, which is even more important, to today's guest, who's the Reverend Dr. Shaun Lambert. Shaun, thank you so much for joining us today. Really looking forward to this podcast. I like things all sort of psychological and psychotherapical, if that word actually exists. For those that don't know you, where are we speaking to you from, good sir?
Yes, I'm in London today. Could have been Yorkshire, up at the Scargill Movement, but yeah, a very warm London. So, but lovely to be here, and thanks for inviting me on, Martin.
Well, hopefully you can say that at the end as well. Well, let's find out a bit more about yourself as well, if that's okay, good sir. 5 important, or maybe not so important questions. Let's see how we get on. Fingers on the buzzers, no conferring. Question number 1. If you could invite anybody from world history for an evening meal, alive or dead, so that you could ask them questions, who would it be?
Yeah, well, I've gone for somebody very obscure, called
we like this.
Diadochus of Photice, who was a 5th century Greek bishop. And I've
never heard of him. Carry on, this is great.
I know. I'd met Simon Barrington Ward, who used to be Bishop of Coventry, who'd written a little book on the Jesus Prayer, and met him a few times to learn about the Jesus Prayer, which is sort of ancient Christian contemplative prayer, which goes, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me. And he said, why don't you sort of research some of the history? And I came across Diadochus of Photice, who was a pioneer of the Jesus Prayer. And he had this beautiful little phrase, let us always keep our eyes fixed on the depths of our heart with an unceasing mindfulness of God. And it was that mindfulness of God that rang me like a bell, changed my life.
Wow.
And I just thought, what is mindfulness of God and how do we cultivate it? Because mainstream secular mindfulness doesn't have mindfulness of God. That's not part of it. Generally, Buddhist mindfulness isn't mindfulness of God. So it sort of seemed to be a Christian distinctive, but it sort of just filled me with this energy to research it. That was back in 2006. And ever since then, I've been researching it, never got bored with it, never run out of energy to, just say, what is this? So it sort of, changed the direction of my life, ended up writing a book about it, doing a PhD on it. And it opened all sorts of doors into the world of mindfulness, and sort of just when it was becoming sort of exponential and increasing largely. And Christian mindfulness, sadly, doesn't really feature in the marketplace. And that's something with others that I've been trying to do something about.
Well, we're going to rectify that later on today, hopefully. We'll see where we end up, because you just never know. We might talk about something completely different. But then let's talk about this person you want to interview then. What's his name again, please?
Yeah, so Diadochus of Photice. So Photice is where he's from, so Greek, 5th century. And I just would love to know how he came up with the idea of the Jesus Prayer, which is sort of lasted 1500, 1600 years. And again, has gone mainstream really in Christian contemplation. So and also it's unusual because it's very embodied. So you say it with your breath. You can use a prayer rope with it. So that tricks your thinking mind into thinking it's doing something.
Sorry, what's a prayer rope?
Yeah, so you've got Catholics have a rosary, which is usually wooden beads, but the Orthodox, and it is an Orthodox prayer, the Jesus Prayer, have a prayer rope, usually made of wool, and they have knots on it, and each knot is tied 7 times or crossed over 7 times. And the apparent reason for that is when they first made these prayer ropes, the devil would come and undo them. So they worked out that if they crossed 7 times each knot, that kept the devil away. So I thought that was, that's a nice, but again, it's embodied. And I think that's James K. Smith, who's a Christian philosopher, says Christians are sort of bubble-headed on stick bodies. We're stuffed full of information. The church is all about information and knowledge. But actually, what we need is to rediscover our bodies, our emotions, our imagination, because a disembodied spirituality is generally a disappointing one.
I'm going to call him Di, if that's right, because they shorten it. And obviously the Welsh would then say, well, he's one of ours, so, without offending too many Welsh people today. So what do we know about Di then, outside of the Jesus prayer?
Well, not a lot, really, apart from he's got some writings. One of his beautiful phrases is trying to follow in the footsteps of the invisible God and sort of tracking what he calls it. So using the word a bit like a tracker would try and follow the spores of an animal and stuff like that. So it's really why I would like to have a conversation with him is to find out more about him.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's my hero. Not that I know a lot about him, but because this one phrase just changed my life in a moment.
Well, that's phenomenal.
Yeah.
That's a great answer. And you said, and you just explained as well about the rope, the prayer rope. How do you actually use that with the prayer?
Yeah, so every time you say the prayer and you say the first part on your in-breath, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, on the in-breath, have mercy on me on the out-breath. And you're sort of not saying it out loud, although you could say it out loud, but you'd have to change your breathing pattern. And then you move on one of the knots. And normally each prayer rope is 100 knots, and every 25 knots you pause and you might intercede, or you might confess something, or you might offer praise or thanksgiving or adoration. So it sort of offers a way of, just sort of structuring.
Yeah, you're detoxing. And then every 20,
Yeah. And there's a great sort of contemporary contemplative called Martin Laird, who's written a book called Into the Silent Land. And he says the Jesus prayer can be used, first of all, as a refuge from our thoughts. So we all have difficult thoughts, worries, anxieties, fears. And the prayer is, he said, it'd be like building a brick wall between you and your thoughts. It's just a refuge. You can have a rest from your thoughts because our thoughts can be very weighty. And then he said we can sort of find inner stillness with the prayer. So we meet difficult thoughts with stillness. And then we notice, do you know what? I'm telling myself a story about this thought, a negative story. So again, we can notice the story, but not get drawn into it. And then he said, we sort of notice that actually we're in a spacious place within, a sort of place of awareness. And that's what you're trying to find in the Jesus prayer, that spacious place of awareness within, where again, thoughts appear as they are rather than sort of catastrophizing them or making them bigger than they are. So yeah, it's a sort of really helpful prayer. I think the other thing he says is what our culture teaches us is boredom and restlessness. So simply trying to stay with a prayer like this reveals to us how quickly we get bored and restless, how quickly we're looking for our phone to pick it up.
Yes.
So it sort of trains our attention.
Not that I would ever do that, of course.
No.
I was just thinking it appeared to wind you up to pick my phone up and wave it at you while you're talking, but I won't do that. But that's great. So if I get into my time machine that I got off on eBay the other week and go back to the 5th century and get our mate Di and bring him to you, obviously, so you can chat, you obviously have to cook him a meal. So what are you going to cook him?
Well, that's a good question. Because, in London, 300 languages, so many different types of food, so many takeaways. You could play it safe and take him somewhere for a nice Greek meal. There are lots of Mediterranean type ones. Or, could just say, would you like to try some fish and chips?
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Expand his horizons.
Yes. And of course, you have to have a tub of curry sauce to go with it and spread it all over the fish.
We could try that as well. Depends how long I want him to be my friend.
I'm sure his mind is open to try all sorts of things.
Yeah, I would hope so.
Of course, you then have to explain what a tomato is, because they wouldn't have had them in those days, and let alone what curry is made out of. So maybe just stick with fish and chips, but then you'd have to explain what a potato is. So good luck with that one.
Yeah.
Let us know how you get on. Question 2. Who is your favourite biblical character or favourite biblical story or favourite parable, please, Shaun?
Yeah, I think my favorite character is actually Jacob from the Old Testament. And I sort of cheat a bit. I like him in the story when he wrestles with God. I think there's just something about him. I mean, again, he's one of these characters that have feet of clay, that gets things wrong, but he's a survivor. He's wily, he's cunning. He tries to navigate very difficult situations. But in the wrestling with God thing, can be looked at in different ways. But one of the ways I think about it is that in part, he's wrestling with his shadow self and sort of wrestling with his fear in this encounter with the angel of God. And of course, he has to face his brother straight afterwards. And I think this facing his own shadow, his own fears in this encounter with the angel has enabled him to then, face his brother.
Do you know what? A podcast recently with another guest, it ended up as being one of the main themes of the podcast about wrestling with God that he could identify with completely. What about your good self and wrestling with God? How'd you get on with that one? And have you won yet?
Yeah, it's something we need to do. I think the other thing that sort of helps me in the story is, he walks with a limp afterwards. And there's this idea of wounded healers as ministers or any Christian, really. Somebody once said to me, don't trust any leader who doesn't walk with a limp. I think we've had to encounter difficulty. We have to acknowledge our woundedness. And I think in all of that, in wrestling with God, we can be real, vulnerable, open about, that we're human beings. So I think, that sort of has really, really helped me.
Hopefully we can pick up on that later on. Thank you. By the way, I've never won a wrestling match with God yet. Question 3, I've tried. If you were Prime Minister for the day and could change any law or impose a new law, what would it be, please, Shaun? And I'll take a frivolous one especially.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to, again, because I'm the Prime Minister now, I'm going to change 2 or enact 2 new laws.
Oh, get you.
Yeah. They're both related, really. One of them is that there should be mandatory swift bricks built into every new home. So those beautiful birds that fly in the sky that come thousands of miles to visit us in the UK. And at the moment, I understand the government is refusing to make this mandatory. There's a big campaign going on at the moment.
Why? Go on, you can say a little bird told me. Go on, please.
Yeah, a little bird told me.
Thank you.
I first came across it through a book called Fledgling, which was written by someone called Hannah Bourne Taylor, who raised a swift that had fallen out just out the sky or out the nest, or completely gave her whole life to raising this chick. And also there was another bird she raised and let it nest in her hair and all sorts of stuff. And she was living in Africa at the time, came back to the UK and then started campaigning for swifts because they're in decline. So where we are up in Yorkshire, at Scargill Movement, we have a 90-acre estate and we have swifts, we have swallows, we have house martins. And to see them return to the same place, I think like a swallow weighs as much as a fountain pen. And they just come these thousands of miles and they have this incredible ability to come back to the same point to raise a family. And swifts are, they're like jet fighters in the sky. They have these beautiful wings and they're very fast. And most of their lives, they're on the wing. Again, if they bump into something and they're on the ground, you have to relaunch them because they can't get themselves up.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So beautiful, beautiful birds. And similar to that, hares are very beautiful.
Yes.
And there's another book out called Raising Hare, where this, again, author found this little leveret baby hare and managed to enable it still to be wild, but to see her home as a place of safety. And there's no close season where hares are protected, especially when they're all sort of breeding and giving birth and stuff like that. So, a female hare that's pregnant can be shot or babies waiting for her. That would be another thing that I would change. I think it's that attention to the wild around us and seeing that as an important part of our stewardship of creation.
I like that.
Yeah.
I can see that going through, surely, Mr. Prime Minister.
I would hope so. But, we live in a strange world, don't we? Where these things don't seem to matter. I mean, the other thing we did just recently on that, we had a audio ecologist come to Scargill and recorded the soundscape of the place, because not just animals disappearing, soundscapes are disappearing. So we wanted to capture it for posterity, so the noise that swallows make or the noise that the swifts make, because they really shriek. But this guy had I think it's called a hydrophone. So he put a microphone into the pond.
Yes.
We were listening to tadpoles munching at the bottom of the pond. Got another mic that can pick up insects. I would be a green prime minister. I would be campaigning for our ecology and climate change and all of these things, doing the best we can.
Well, there you go. Obviously, we need a frivolous answer then, because we need to show prime ministers can have a sense of humour. Any frivolous answers?
Yes, I think if the temperature goes above 32 in any city in London, the government should provide free ice cream for everybody. They should have their own fleet of ice cream vans that just dispense.
Stunning answer. The trouble is, you know what's going to happen there, don't you? Yes, well, I'm lactose intolerant. Okay, so we'll do lactose intolerant ice cream. Yes, but I don't like chocolate or vanilla ice cream. Well, it goes on. It'd be like a reenactment of a Monty Python sketch.
Yeah, we'd have to have a big variety, wouldn't we?
Or you just say, no, sorry, it's vanilla, but we'll also do lactose intolerant vanilla.
You could solve it that way. But on a hot day, I think, who's going to complain?
Oh, I'm sure there will be plenty. I have no doubts about that.
You're probably right.
Can't park on there, it's double yellow lights. Oh, you could just go on and on and on. And by the end of the day, you go, why did I bother?
I know.
That's a good answer, thank you. You get my vote on that. Question 4, outside of family events, what has been your most enjoyable day out so far, please, Shaun?
Yeah, it's a recent one. Again, up in Yorkshire, it was a beautiful sunny day. So we're in the Wharf Dale, got the River Wharf, mile down to a little village called Kettlewell. All the guests are gone. So as a community, we went down to the river, and behind one of the pubs is a beautiful, not a pond, but a deeper part of the river where it's quite calm. It's not got a strong current or anything. So we went swimming.
Yeah.
You got ducks going past you. You got swallows sweeping by your head. The sun was out. There were dragonflies. It was just a beautiful, beautiful moment of being rather than doing. And I think that's one of the problems with our culture and even with the church, which can be very activist, is we're doing all the time. It's driven doing. So we've got these endless to-do lists. And this was just pure being.
Yeah.
And then walked 50 yards to the pub, sat in the sunshine, had a drink, had a chat. And it was just no responsibility. Everything had been, laid down. It was just quiet. It was just beautiful. So I think that has been one of my most favorite days recently. Just that sense of community, but while swimming, surrounded by nature. And then, sitting outside the pub in the sunshine.
And then ordering an ice cream afterwards. But ice cream and beer doesn't go down too well, so I just have another pint.
They do have a nice little ice cream place. So it would have been possible to also have an ice cream. But as you say, how do you mix these things?
Yeah, I know. Someone will come up with, I've got a beer-flavoured ice cream. Okay. No, I can't quite see something. Great. Yeah, that sounds absolutely idyllic. Absolutely, I did it. And I know what you mean by Wharfdale, having been through there myself. Yeah, beautiful part of the world. And of course, they make good speakers, but that's another story altogether. What has been your most embarrassing moment? Question 5, please.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting question, because I think there's different forms of embarrassment.
Yeah.
And I think some of it is we live in a culture that shames us. So I think there's healthy embarrassment, and then there's unhealthy embarrassment where we're shamed as if there's something wrong with us. But I think there can be a healthy sort of moral embarrassment. And I just want to, tell a story about that, because I didn't become a Christian till my early 20s. I was working for a high street bank. There's a very nice young woman who worked in the bank, and I asked her out on a date. And she said, Shaun, I would go out with you, but you're not a Christian.
Now, where have I heard this story before? Carry on.
Yeah, I'd just done an English degree, and I thought romantic love was the highest form of love. And I felt a sort of moral embarrassment that there was a higher form of love that I'd never thought about. And I'd just a few weeks before, I'd been mocking another Christian in the branch who talked about tithing. So I wasn't a Christian working in a bank. The aim is, if you're a bank manager, to have a £1 million home, 6-figure salary, 3 foreign holidays, a nice car, all of that stuff. So to imagine that somebody was giving away 10% of their money, I just thought, you're completely
bonkers.
Yeah. So again, felt a bit embarrassed about that. And then We had another guy in the branch, a really lovely guy who was a Christian. He said, "You've got to handle this carefully, Shaun. Don't go to her church," because obviously I was really interested in this sort of moral question. He said, "Come to mine. We have Roy Castle playing trumpet in the band.
Wow.
We've got lots of young people, and then you can work out what this Christianity is all about." So I went along, and church was packed, hundreds of people. Graham Kendrick was guest worship leader. Then people started speaking in tongues, raising their hands, interpreting tongues, prophesying. And I felt a different sort of embarrassment. I felt embarrassed for them. How very un-British, how very un-English. They're just letting the side down. I thought, gosh, this is really not very cultural. I'm never going back there again. 2 weeks later, my heart had been strangely warmed. I went back. In the end, became a Christian there, got baptized there, got married there. They sent me to Bible college. So actually, again, this is sort of the healthy side of embarrassment.
Yeah.
I
hear that.
Where I think it's lots of people made to feel embarrassed in an unhealthy way, especially being shamed in public or exposed in public.
Yeah.
For something they may or may not have done. But I think the emotion is there in a healthy way for a reason. Again, that was just a conversation that changed my life.
Wonderful.
Again, one short moment.
Yeah.
Where I went off on a different trajectory and ended up at Bible college. And my dad wouldn't, when I told him I was going to Bible college, wouldn't talk to me for 3 months.
Wow.
Yeah, he said, "You're wasting your career, you're wasting all this money I spent on your education." So he was really upset. Anyway, after a few years, he sort of looked at what I was doing and thought, he said, "Shaun, do they have bishops in the Baptist church?" And sadly, I had to tell him, yeah, unless you're in Eastern Europe, no bishops. So that's not a career path. So he'd imagined a whole new career path for me.
Oh.
So I had to disappoint him on that.
Did he ever put 2 and 2 together?
In terms of?
Being a Christian himself in the end?
Yeah, so it had a big impact on my whole family. So my sister became a Christian. My mum became a Christian. My dad came to a festival called New Wine.
Yeah.
And there was a sort of altar call by this beautifully spoken vicar, had this amazing BBC pronunciation. And because I think it was this person and the way he spoke, my dad stood up and made a commitment.
And the vicar's name was?
Oh, well, that would be telling, wouldn't it?
Oh, go on. Give me a name check as an encouragement.
It was somebody called Bruce Collins.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, who was an Anglican vicar.
Good for him.
He just had a voice that my dad trusted.
Amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Simple things like that.
Yeah.
Can be all that's needed.
Yeah.
You were the physical outward side of it.
Yeah.
And it took somebody else.
Absolutely. And then, my mum and dad became regular churchgoers and all of that. So it was very encouraging, just that.
Yeah, absolutely.
When somebody sees a change in you and you doing something they didn't expect, then Holy Spirit can really work with that. Yeah, I think this relational side of trying to be more like Jesus, which is not easy.
Tell me about it. I mean, that's the encouraging thing for those listening today who might have been a Christian for yonks and they haven't seen their parents become a Christian. The parents are still antagonistic towards their own Christian faith. Hey, guess what? Look at yourself, good sir. Look what happened later on in life with your parents, all because they went along and heard someone speaking as a vicar with a BBC accent.
Yeah.
Which is brilliant.
It is. Could have put someone else off.
Yeah.
It really worked for him. Yeah.
And of course, the $64,000 question, because I can empathise so much with what you shared, and I'll tell you afterwards why. Whatever happened to that girl in the bank who said she couldn't go out with you?
Yeah, well, we did go out for a little bit. It was very nice. Didn't work out in the end, but, I'm ever grateful for that sort of moral courage.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to say, be real about her faith. And it had a huge impact on me, really. My whole life has changed, and I wouldn't have missed it for the world. Sometimes when you're thinking as a minister, well, where's the next bit of money coming? Yeah, just to get a new pair of shoes for the children, whatever. You do think back and thought, yeah, well, if I'd still be in the bank, this would. But yeah, God has opened doors and God's providence, and we've just done things that we would never have expected.
Yeah.
Yeah, travel lightly.
Yes, those sliding doors moments, as they're known as now.
Yeah, very much.
The film of a few years ago, where you could choose to go through one door, but you decide in real time you're going to go through the other one. Then you think, well, what happened if I went through the first one instead of the second one? And in fact, let's take it a bit further, if that's okay, because one of my favourite podcasts that I have done since zero time the chat said that at least 90% of times when you hear a girl or a boy say, I'm going to marry that person because God has told me, it wasn't actually the case. And then we also have on the other side of the coin, people saying, oh, well, I know I'm a Christian, that person isn't, but by going out with him, I can bring him to the Lord. And of course, you know that if I was speaking out on this one, I said, well, no, you don't do that. Just let God bring that person. Be friends, but don't take it any further. That's my own personal feeling on it. So if that's my personal feeling, what's your personal feeling on it, please?
Yeah, I've sort of met all of those situations.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to say to someone, this is more like from a pastoral perspective, you should or you shouldn't do this. So I would want to really get them to question, have they heard from God? And it's one of those ones where sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. I've seen both of those as well. And I've seen the regrets of sometimes going to church on your own can be really difficult if your partner, your loved one doesn't go with you.
Yeah, exactly.
One of the things that really helped me that somebody said to me about being a leader is that lots of people want you to take responsibility for their life. But actually, as a leader, your job is to help them take responsibility for their own life.
That's very good.
So that's what I would try to do is, work with whatever ethical decision somebody is wrestling with, is to try and help them take responsibility for whatever decisions they make, giving them as much wisdom as I can.
Yeah.
And sometimes, obviously, people are at stages where they can't take responsibility for their own life. And that's then a different issue for a leader. We have to try and, help in a different way.
Thank you. I want to talk more about mindfulness, but before we do, I've still got the image of swimming in a lake. Well, not quite a lake. Before going to the pub and you've seen dragonflies swimming around you. Sounds absolutely idyllic, which therefore takes us to the Scargill Movement, which I don't think has anything to do with Arthur Scargill, the famous National Union of Miners chairman. So tell us more, please. What is the Scargill Movement and what is your job role as honorary chaplain?
Yeah, so Scargill Movement is a Christian community. So there are no staff. So you have about 30 people who live there in community with a sort of pathway or rule of life. And they have basically offer hospitality of God to people. So they offer retreats, churches come, all of that sort of stuff. Really busy, just coming up end of July and August. They've got 3 little summer festivals where people come and camp, and they have musicians, comedians, actors coming, and they have youth work, children's work, and teaching, all sorts. So it's a fabulous place, 90-acre estate. It's sort of originally founded in the 50s as a sort of sister house to Lee Abbey down in Devon. So Lee Abbey was set up sort of after the Second World War to provide a place for young Europeans to come and to reconcile and all of that. And it became community and retreat centre as well. So they thought they needed a Lee Abbey in the north. And then sort of, I think it was early 90s, closed down. And then the guy, Phil Stone, who's the current director, sort of resurrected it with others, including Adrian Plass. Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful place. One of their values is playfulness, silliness. They take play seriously. Yeah, I've joined community sort of back in 2022. So I'd not been well during lockdown running a church, and I'd ended up in A&E with a suspected heart attack. And we just felt as a family that we just needed to lay down. So it was interesting. I was reading Luke 5:1-11 about when the disciples pulled up their boats, left them on shore. And I just felt God say to me, you just need to pull up the boat of pastoral ministry, leave it on shore, come with me, we're going to do something else. And in the same week, God used the same passage to speak to my wife. So we sort of said to each other, oh, I think God is saying this, and this is the passage. And then the other one saying, oh, well, So that sort of what I would call spiritual entanglement of the Holy Spirit was really helpful. We've had that a couple of times in our marriage. So we went and joined community in lockdown. And what was very beautiful was that the whole community was a bubble. So we could eat together, worship together. Having been denied that face-to-face opportunity to eat and worship together, it was incredibly moving. Lots of people in church are on their own, feeling very lonely and isolated. So just this power of community. And again, in London, for young people trying to buy somewhere. So I'm very interested in community and how can we create different structures so that young people of all ages can actually have their own private space, but also have some community space and afford to live somewhere, because that's, the housing market is completely broken. So my role is great. I love the title, honorary mindfulness chaplain. So I'm part of the community still, even though I live in London, go up every couple of months, and I lead retreats. I've just done one on inhabiting your Sabbath self, which was a lot of fun. And then they do communion services and services on a Sunday, and they do a live stream service. So I do those things as well. So I really, really enjoyed it. And, they have different teams. So when I first joined, I said to Phil, the director, Brother Lawrence, who said he contemplated God while washing the dishes. And Phil said, I'm really glad you like Brother Lawrence, because I'm going to put you in the kitchen one day a week. So there I was. That was part of my job, was, making quiche for 60 people or spaghetti bolognese for 60 people. And
there you go.
Yeah, but it's given me a lot of confidence. So I do a lot of cooking at home now and try different things. Yeah. And so it's really a beautiful place and very quiet, beautiful natural silence. And they've got this amazing chapel, which is sort of Scandinavian, triangular shaped. And again, it's just coming from London. I love London, all the buzz, but to go out into the green space.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we have a pond. We built a pond 2 or 3 years ago. And last time I went, which was just a couple of weeks ago, I saw 6 newts. I was very happy. But someone else has seen 8. So, I've got to go back and see if I can see more. And we've got frogs in there, tadpoles. It's just beautiful. I just love seeing them.
Yeah, why? Why fascination with newts?
I don't know. I think I was born in Kenya. We lived in Kenya. And we had geckos, a type of lizard that would be, they're just beautiful. I once had a chameleon as a pet. So just, fascinated by animals. I think really all of that love of the wild comes from being born in Kenya, and we would go to the game park. We would see all these, lions, elephants, giraffes, zebras. We'd go down to the coast to Mombasa, Malindi. We'd swim in the Indian Ocean. I mean, that was interesting because we were in Nairobi and we saw Jaws. Usually it was a drive-in cinema, but they built an indoor cinema. And then the next week we went down to the coast, and there are 3 children standing on the edge of the sea saying, "We're not going in. We've just seen Jaws. Why would you make us go in?" But we got over it.
But only 2 came out.
Only 2 came out. Yeah, they've got a reef, and normally the reef keeps the sharks away.
Please tell me your pet chameleon, you called him Karma.
I wasn't didn't know a word at that age, I don't think, but it would have been good, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was before Boy George, sadly.
Thank you. All this builds up very nicely then to you as a psychotherapist. And you've already told us as well a little bit about your book. I don't really want to talk about the book as much because I'd like people to go and buy it.
Yeah. Excellent.
So if we talk around it instead, that'd be far better, because otherwise you're going to lose out, and then tens of millions of people are going to be buying the book. First of all, let's get into the mindset. I suppose that is the correct term, isn't it, really? What is the difference between mindfulness from a secular point of view and mindfulness from a Christian point of view? I think you've already said this, but what do you think?
Well, I think that's really helpful. So I think it comes down to intention. What's our intention? So secular mindfulness, mainstream mindfulness, which I came across when I was doing my counseling and psychotherapy training, is mindfulness for health. It's mindfulness for well-being. So if somebody has anxiety or depression, it's just trying to come out of those places into a place of well-being. Or chronic pain, it can help with stress. Ruby Wax once said, 1 in 4 of us in this country suffer from a mental health condition, but 4 in 4 of us are stressed. So, it can help with all of those things. And mindfulness is simply our God-given capacity for attention and awareness. And it has practices that enable us to shift out of thinking, to become aware of our thoughts and feelings, and to be a witness of them rather than a victim of them. So it's a really helpful thing. And secular sort of psychology is late to the party. Basically, all the faith traditions have some sort of mindfulness, some version of working with attention and awareness. So in Christianity, watchfulness has a family resemblance to mindfulness. But also mindfulness is a biblical word. So Psalm 8, what is humanity, O God, that you are mindful of them, that you care for them. And that word mindful in the Hebrew means to remember. And it's linked, this beautiful phrase I love. Scholars talk about the semantic field of a word, but it's linked to the idea of paying attention. Mm-hmm. So God remembers us, he pays attention to us, and he puts that paying attention, remembering into action so that he actually takes care of us. So there's always been a biblical idea. So the intention with Christian mindfulness is to be mindful of God, to pay attention to God. So mainstream mindfulness, to be mindful of our health, is very important. Jesus said, I've come that you have life in all its fullness. He wants us to experience well-being. He wants us to experience joy. But one of the Christian definitions of well-being that I really like is paying attention to what matters most. So that's God, that's our values, and I think that really, really helps us. So they're not, it's sort of both and, it's not either or. I think what I've learned from mainstream mindfulness was to come out of my head and inhabit my body, my emotions, my imagination. And that's a much more satisfying way of living than just being in our heads. Because virtual culture, being on our phones 8 hours a day, we're basically living in our heads. We shouldn't be living just in our heads. We really need, Jesus came to live in a body to show us how to live in a body. We really need an embodied existence. So the Christian mindfulness I teach is, I would call it an embodied spirituality. And one of the key things with that is our body, our breath, our senses are always in the present moment, which is reality. Our minds can worry about something that's going to happen tomorrow or brood about something that happened yesterday. They can be at any point in time. And a wandering mind like that is an unhappy mind. So the present moment, according to C.S. Lewis in the Screwtape Letters, is the point at which time touches eternity. So theologically, to be in the present moment is where we can most meet God. But we're not taught how to be in the present moment. We're all over the place, worrying or brooding. Yeah.
Well, that's still me. But what you don't know about me is that way back in 1994, I was signed off by a very well-researched GP who knew that I was under severe stress. I couldn't even lift up a cup of coffee, and he knew, and he was brilliant, together with another leading person in the church movement who went round talking to church about stress, saying, you've got to obey your body here. And so I was signed off work for 6 weeks. So ever since then, and that's why I now take 2 months off when I'm doing this podcast throughout July and August. So those that are listening, because this is going out now about September, October time, that's why I take it off. I need to chillax a bit, if that's possible in my brain. Ask my wife. But in light of what you said about you and your wife and the boat going on the shore in Luke, you're parking your occupation, just spend time with Jesus. If Jesus just came into the room now, what do you think he would say about the way that we as Christians in the workplace, because you were in the workplace in the bank, I was in the finance industry as well, and in insurance in particular, what would you think he would say about where we're going currently with our own theological ideas, putting Jesus first, apparently, and work?
Yeah, I think what he would say, he'd probably tell a parable.
I like parables. I understand those.
Yeah, he'd tell us a parable. I always think if he came back today, we'd invite him to preach, he'd tell a parable, and we'd say, well, Jesus, we really prefer sermons with 3 points, all begin with the same letter, so we're going to send you off to Bible college. He would, not in a judgmental way, but through telling stories. So he might tell us the story of St. Anthony, and St. Anthony was a very well-known monk, and he was sort of chilling out with the other monks. And this hunter came along and was really disappointed that these monks weren't working hard. And he said to St. Anthony, I'm really disappointed about this. So St. Anthony said, you've got a beautiful bow on your back. Can you just stretch it for me? So he stretched it. He said, can you stretch it a bit further? He said, yeah. He said, no, that's not far enough. Stretch it a bit further. He said, if I stretch it any further, it'll break. And he said, so it is with the monks. Actually, we're like these bows. We need to allow it to come back to the relaxed position. And that's how we're created. And I was just looking at the Sabbath. And when, in the Lord's Prayer, thy kingdom come, but give us this daily bread, it probably should be translated, give us this day, the coming day's bread. So it's a reference to manna and the Sabbath and the Old Testament story that actually that's asking us to stop and rest, to not do, to not gather, not to go after food, not to work, and just to still. And again, feeding of the 5,000 is a manna story. Proclaiming the year of the Lord's favor, that's the year of Jubilee. So actually being, resting, Sabbath is the first thing we should put in our diary. So it's not a reward at the end of a busy week. It's the beginning of a week where we prepare for work. So actually the first thing we should put in our diaries is our Sabbath. And I think that's something Jesus would say. And of course, somebody was just reading, a theologian said that Jesus was crucified in part because of who he ate with. So I think he would say to us, don't eat fast food, slow it down, sit around the table with people, who are different to you, listen to each other. But I think he would want us to stop being mad activists first. One of my favorite little passages in Mark where it says very early in the morning, he got up, left the house and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. And the sense is this is something he did regularly. But that's really hard to learn to do that. And I've sort of, been in ministry 30 years. And it's only more recently that I've been able to resist doing the doing first and putting the being first. And I think as well, he'd say you're doing too much, far too much. A lovely Christian coach about 5 years ago who said in ministry, when you start out, you're juggling hundreds of things, but one deep thing might emerge. And for me, the deep thing was contemplative prayer, mindfulness, the Sabbath, being, not doing, and trying to help people with that. So I'd been doing that alongside running a church. And that's one of the reasons I went to community. I just thought, I just want to do one deep thing. I don't want to juggle. Important though, health and safety, electrical installation, condition reports are, and running a church, all of these things. I just want to do one deep thing. And of course it's risk. So we didn't stop having a manse, stopped having a stipend. We moved from a 4-bedroom detached house to a 2-bedroom flat. So you had to get rid of a lot of stuff. And then when we came back to London, we moved from this 2-bedroom flat to a 2-bedroom furnished flat. So basically we had to get rid of everything else. So we got everything we own in 2 carloads. And that's probably, we could do that now if we moved again. We haven't missed all of that stuff. So it's traveling lightly. But again, we live in a very acquisitive world, over consuming, buying the latest thing. I like all the nice things in the world, but actually traveling lightly, it's very freeing, very liberating.
As a psychotherapist, and the great thing is that you know what the word empathy means, as in you can't just say, oh yeah, well, I don't understand, but yes, sorry to hear that. Whereas actually you'll get alongside them, say, I've been there myself, which is very, very important. It sounds to me as if what you're saying is that rather than keep do, just do one do and enjoy more of the being.
Yeah. I was reading another book called 4,000 Weeks, which is what the average person in the West might have, 4,000 weeks. And that's exactly what this author was saying. We think we can multitask, but actually our brains don't work like that. So, if you do one thing and then switch to another thing, it can take 20 minutes for your brain to get the same level of attentiveness back. So, he said, just have one priority, just do one thing. Once you've done that, try something else. So we are trying to do too much, but I think it comes back to what is the good life? And I think Jesus tells us what the good life is. There is a life in all its fullness. There's a kingdom life full of the Holy Spirit, but a lot of it is about being, not doing. So it's interesting when he says, consider the lilies or the birds of the air. The Greek words there are really strong words of attention. One of them is pay the same attention to the lilies that you would to scripture. It's that strong. And of course, if we actually go and look at the birds of the air or the lilies, we come out of our heads, we come into our bodies, we come into our senses, we come into the present moment. And that's when we might have an epiphany, like Psalm 8. The psalmist goes out to look at the stars, considers the heavens, same very strong, attentive word. And then he has this epiphany. God is mindful of me. In the midst of this infinite beauty, God is mindful of me. And what I would say, and this is the wisdom that's helped me the most, what we pay attention to is our life. So if we're paying attention to social media, the virtual world, all of our online culture, that's our life. And a lot of that is negative. So that's our life. But also what we pay attention to shapes us. So we become shaped into negativity. So it's interesting. Sometimes I ask folk, and you can think about this, how many thoughts do you have on an average day? And the answer is thousands. And you can't actually, Martin, even empty your mind. It's always filling up with stuff. People worry.
It's mostly about football.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And then I say, how many thoughts do you have that are negative? And neuroscience would say 80% of our thoughts are negative.
Yeah.
That we're 3 to 4 times more sensitive to negative information than positive information. And actually, negative information sticks like Velcro. positive information slides out like Teflon.
Yeah.
So we have to intentionally focus on other things than the negative, because that's our default. And so when Paul says, whatever is true and gentle and noble, focus on these things, it's not think on these things, it's pay a deep attention to these things. That's actually a very important spiritual principle. And then we will lay down new neural pathways, which are positive and healthy. And if we don't walk the negative pathways in our mind, like any pathway, they disappear, because we've got these beautiful neuroplastic God-given brains. And I think the other thing with that, if we have a, say, -1 to -10 is the negative. If something happens that's -1, we spot it straight away. If the positive is +1 to +10, we don't notice the positive till +5. That's what the research says. So one of the things I try and do every day is, 10-finger gratitude, just 10 things I'm grateful for, but small things.
Yes.
When I was up in Yorkshire, the boiler wasn't working in the house I was living in. And so I like a cold shower, but I prefer it when I've had a hot shower first.
Yes.
And it's 23 degrees outside, not 17, just being grateful that you can have a hot shower, or, that you've actually got water in your tap, or you've got mint in the garden that you can pick and have a cup of mint tea. I think we let these small, beautiful things pass us by, and we need to, pay attention to them.
Very quickly, before we wrap up and find out who your Christian hero is, obviously I'd like you to plug as well your latest book, Mindful Formation, A Pathway to Spiritual Liberation. For those that might be going through it themselves, or certainly they will know their minister, because I've met many in my walk with other ministers realising that actually they feel they have to do everything. And it's always, I've got to do this because they can't do it. I've got to do this because I can't do that. They can't do it, I have to do it. And you're wondering, well, how many months is it going to go before you suffer burnout? And inevitably they do, but they can never actually blame themselves. That's my scenario on the whole situation. What have you seen from this, and what would you recommend?
It's so important. I mean, just in the Anglican Church, I think there's research that 1 in 5 vicars suffer from chronic depression. But I know I talk to so many ministers who are stressed, burnt out. And I think one of the problems with the role of being a minister is that what they call your alarm brain is on all the time, because there's always so many things going on, so many decisions to make. One of the things that somebody said to me really helpfully is that you've got to disappoint people at a rate they can stand as a leader. So actually, you've got to be prepared to disappoint people and put in boundaries. And I was fortunate, Claire, my wife, we had young children very early on in our ministry. She really insisted on, had my day off. I also took a study day. She also insisted, not out more than 3 or 4 nights, that took the holidays. And actually in 23 years of ministry in the same church, I had 3 sabbaticals. So I think you have to put the boundaries in. I think the really difficult thing is what I would try to do is to stop things that we don't need to do anymore.
Such as?
Well, I thought lockdown was a great opportunity for churches because they had to stop everything, to not pick up everything afterwards.
Yeah.
But I talked to so many ministers that everything they used to do is being picked up again, even though it's like, people don't want to let go of stuff. I mean, it's interesting. Just before lockdown, we were deciding, do we do a holiday club, which we used to do every year? And for some reason, we just felt, this was sort of February, we're not going to plan for a holiday club. We couldn't quite put our finger on it, but we just felt it wasn't, going to be the thing to do. And there was quite a lot of fuss that we weren't doing a holiday club. And then, pandemic lockdown hit. Yeah, I think we just need to, we're doing too much, and we're putting too many people under too much pressure, not just ministers, it's congregations, I think. And again, there's been a sort of, after lockdown, a great withdrawal. People suddenly stopped volunteering for all these things and suddenly thought, you know what? I don't want to pick them up again. So each church should really just not try and do everything, but maybe choose 1 or 2 things they could do very well. And I would always say, if this thing can't be done by other people and only by me, maybe we shouldn't do it. But you have to go at a pace and disappoint people at a rate they can stand. Yeah. So it's not easy to shift that mindset.
Yeah. And the thing that I learned the most back in 1994, again, chatting to this counsellor, was that I had to learn. And here I was as a training officer myself, training people how to present and everything else. I had to learn how to say, I'm actually saying no to the request and not no to the person.
Yeah.
And that was so liberating. And if that's my only thing I can offer today in this podcast to people listening, is saying no to the request, not no to the person. And you can tell them that. It's amazing what you'll see as a result of it. What would be the one thing you would say to those people today who maybe not being a minister, but are in the congregation, or maybe not in the congregation, but are really struggling with everything that is really on top of them? What's one thing you'd say to them?
Yeah, I would say ministry, serving is a marathon, not a sprint. And we have to put in those boundaries. And actually, the first thing to do, though, is to sort out your being. Put in the Sabbath, put in the rest. And out of that, I think your phrase is a beautiful one, but liberation sort of theologians who very much emphasis on compassion and social activism, they realized that they were all burning out and getting angry and disappointed. So they realized that actually they had to change their spirituality and they had to be first and immerse themselves in the compassion of God and then do. So we can't do everything. It's simply not possible. So yeah, do one thing and do it well.
Thank you. And that confirms what my vicar said to me only a couple of years ago. Namely, look, just do the podcast, trust in God, look after your family. And he also said, go and play golf.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, isn't it? I can do podcasts. Am I expected to go all around the world in my private jet? Yes. I mean, no. Just do what you're good at. Just one thing you're good at and see what comes out of it as a result. I'd like you, please, to just very quickly tell us about your book, Mindful Formation, A Pathway to Spiritual Liberation. Who's it aimed at and how can they get hold of it, please?
So I think one of the sort of main waves of spirituality more recently is spiritual formation. So what we would have called discipleship or sanctification or becoming like Christ. Generally, the term is spiritual formation. So the book is about being formed spiritually into Christ likeness, but through mindfulness, through paying attention, through awareness. And it's really, I'm very honest about my struggles with mental health and with trauma and other things. So, I think anyone who wants the sort of real engagement with difficulty rather than pull your socks up or you haven't got enough faith or those types of things will help. And it sort of offers practices that enable us, because we can't be changed without practices. Information doesn't change us on its own. So it offers simple practices that enable us to begin to build habits that begin to change us, shift us from doing to being. Theological students would enjoy it because it sort of traces some of the history of contemplation and mindfulness of God. Hopefully it's for everyone. And I have a sort of high view of readers. And when I do a retreat, high view of people I'm speaking to. So I don't try and dumb anything down, try to make it accessible. But I think Christianity, life, the world is full of difficult things. And culture says, if it's difficult, don't bother. Life should be easy, free of pain, free of suffering. But I think actually we need to sort of do what I call a spiral learning. If something's difficult, we need to keep coming back to it. And that's what I try and do in the book. Is come back to some more difficult things, but in a spiral way so that we can go deeper with them rather than avoid them, which in the end doesn't help. It's a bit like going back to Jacob. Often we have to turn and face the shadow that's troubling us if we're going to deal with it. We can't run from it.
Great way to end. You started off about the wrestling with Jesus, with God, shall I say, and in the shadow, you bring it to the end. Oh, what a fantastic bookend. As if you've done this before, sir. Brilliant. So one of these podcasts, I think, where people have to listen to again and bring it through at their own pace. St. Anthony sounds like a great bloke.
Yeah.
When I go back to get old Di, maybe I'll call in and get St. Anthony as well, and we can hear another of his stories, because I love parables. I love stories because that's how we learn. And if you've got plenty of stories like that in your book, plus you're talking about your own health, it sounds like you're on to a proverbial winner there. And you did actually very quickly mention, so we'll just finish on this bit, that you were in hospital with a suspected heart attack. What exactly was it in the end, sir? Because
I'm not normal profile and there weren't other symptoms apart from severe chest pain, they never really followed it up. So, but we knew something was wrong.
Yeah.
There was a lot of stress. So we made this change of direction. But I had because the chest pains came back a few months ago, I had a CT scan. So a couple of my arteries are moderately blocked in my heart. So they're looking at that now. So that was true 5 years ago, but it was never picked up. So I think in all of that, and blokes especially, if you have chest pain, don't be put off. Go in and get it looked at. Go and get it checked out, even if you're not, the normal profile. So, but God's grace, we found this beautiful place on community to live, very, very happy, stress-free there. And then, what I do in London is very enjoyable. A lot of it doesn't involve stress. So I try to help people, but in a balanced way.
Wonderful. Well, Shaun, thank you so much for sharing. I'm excited to now know, drum roll please, the Reverend Dr. Shaun Lambert. Who is your Christian hero, please?
My Christian hero is somebody who was born in Constantinople in the 7th century, called Maximus the Confessor, who stood up for some beautiful theology, and at the end of his life, because they thought he was a heretic, had his right hand cut off so he couldn't write, and his tongue cut out so he couldn't speak. But he had this beautiful theology called Logos theology from John's Gospel. Mm-hmm. So in the beginning of John, it says that everything that has been made was made by the Logos, the Word, Jesus. And he said that means that all of us are little Logoses, little words, little creative words of God. It's a bit like a Christian is a little Christ. It's just a beautiful idea that in each person, there is this unique God-given identity that if we can explore, we will find our purpose, our calling, who we are, and it can't be, taken away from us. And Rowan Williams picks up on this idea of Logos theology, and he says, speaking the truth in love, which Christians love to do, is not tearing people off a strip, not giving people a piece of our mind, not being critical. It's trying to see that God-given created word in them and calling it out. So that's sort of what I want to see. And it's linked to this idea of awakened, encouraging language. So again, we're not changing people by criticizing them. We're changing people through kingdom language that builds up, that encourages, that sort of awakens this sense in them that I'm a child of God with this unique identity. That's a word spoken by the light to be light to the world. And that's true for every single person. So I just think that is such a contrast, an act of resistance to our culture, which shames people, pulls people down, destroys people.
What else do we know about Maximus then, apart from the fact he lost his hand and his tongue?
He's called a confessor because he suffered, but wasn't ultimately martyred. So he suffered a lot, but wasn't ultimately martyred. And again, like all of these guys, not a huge amount, but he's got some beautiful writings. This is sort of a bit like Didacus, a guy I keep coming back to and trying to find out a bit more about. But this idea that in each person is this beautiful God-given creative identity is something, again, that's been transformational, really helpful for me. And I try and see it in other people. Easy to see the negative, but to see what God has put there is a more beautiful thing, I think.
Yeah. And for people listening today, it's like, well, try and work out the positive things in life.
Yeah.
Even if it's a small thing.
Yeah.
Like seeing a newt.
Yeah. It can make all the difference. Like our first waking moment, we're most vulnerable. And if we can just intentionally focus on something that we're grateful for or thankful for, our whole day can change its mood.
Shaun Lambert, Reverend Dr. Shaun Lambert, thank you so much for joining us today. And for those that want to get hold of your book, how can they do that?
You can pick it up on Amazon, most bookshops. You can go on my website, shaunlambert.co.uk. That will take you to different links. And obviously you can look at scargillmovement.org if you want to come on a retreat, have a Sabbath break, have a rest.
And Shaun spelled S-H-A-U-N. As opposed to Shaun, spelled S-E-A-N, which I always thought growing up as a kid was pronounced Sean.
Yeah.
Sean Connery.
That's fair enough.
Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a phenomenal podcast. Yeah, look forward to speaking to you again. Thank you so much, Shaun. God bless.
Thanks, Martin.
And if you haven't already, please hit the like and subscribe button. It really means a lot. Thank you very much indeed. Next time on Off-Grid Christianity.
I said, I can't deny that you exist. I've had too many experiences to say that you don't exist. That would be a lie. I know you exist. I said, however, I can deny that you are a loving God, because what are you doing about these people? The people I'm seeing on TV could easily be the people I used to play with and the people I grew up with. And you don't care. What are you doing about it? I can't see you at work. Why are you allowing this to happen? And I think it's a question we all face is how can a loving God allow suffering? And it was one I really confronted with God. I got extremely, extremely angry with him. I shouted at him every swear word I knew, which quite honestly wasn't very many. And I tried to throw my Bible out of the window, and I got really angry. And I said, you know what, I'm done. Because if you don't care about the things that I care about, I'm not interested in following you. I don't care whether you're God or not. I'm not doing this. And I shut my Bible and I thought, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not going to church. I'm not doing any of it. And I sort of sat there and thought, oh, well, that frees up my Sundays then, doesn't it?
So please join me for the first of a two-parter with special guest, Consultant General and Colorectal Surgeon and Lead for Patient Safety in General Surgery, Caris Grimes, who has just written a book entitled At the Foot of the Cross, How to Pray for Healing and Wholeness. And wow, what a two-parter it is. Until then, cheerio.